So I figured I would just wait 10 minutes. Since my whole morning has been 10 minutes late, we'll wait 10 more minutes and get started. Call to order the meeting for the Ways and Means Committee meeting for February the 4th for the town of Kiowa Island. Good morning, everybody. Should we stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance? Yeah, I just called a...
Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I've got trouble being chairman of the council meetings. Easy boy.
This morning's going to go slow. We're all a little tired or something this morning. It's we can tell that not knowing the difference between the call to order and the roll call, but I'll excuse it this time. May we have the roll call, please?
Alrighty. Chairman Farrell.
Here.
Mayor Bell.
Here.
Mr. Spencer.
Here.
Ms. Tillerson. Here. Ms. Schubert. Here. Everybody here?
Thank you. Does anybody have any recommendation for any changes to the minutes from January 7th meeting? Mr. Spencer?
No.
Then we'll mark the minutes approved. Any citizen comments? We have no citizens in the room. Should I give it 10 more minutes for citizens? Maybe they're in the same boat I'm in this morning and.
They will get another opportunity.
All right, they'll be here 1 o'clock.
Yeah. Flood in here at 10:15 or 10:20.
Okay, so no citizen comments. Old business, we have none. New business, we're to consider the approval of the Barrier Island Ocean Rescue one-year contract extension for beach patrol services. And that's in tab 2 of your book.
Mr. Chairman, this is a request presented to the town by the Barrier Island Ocean Rescue. Currently, they have a contract with the town to provide beach patrol services, and a copy of that contract is also in your packet. We entered into agreement in 2022. The agreement is for 3 years with the option of 2 one-year extensions, and they have put in a request, and you have a copy of the letter asking for the Ways and Means to consider making a recommendation to town council to execute that one-year option. This particular extension would not incur any additional costs in terms of changes to the contract. It will remain at $584,000 annual, along with all of the other scheduling that is presented on page 2 of the original contract. And then I have Craig, thank you. My brain is 10 minutes. And he's also here. He helps manage that contract if you have any specific questions for staff.
And my only, not a question, but just a clarification is, this is the contract just for the beach patrol services and not for code enforcement, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Code enforcement could be coming back in March or later this month.
Great. Okay.
Chairman, I move approval of the one-year extension of the BIOR contract.
I'll second that.
Any discussion beyond what we've had?
Mr. Chairman, I do have some issues with the contract that I think it would be appropriate to revisit at some point in time. I think, as a general matter, BIOR has provided extraordinarily good service to the town and protecting the health, safety, and welfare of residents and visitors on the beach. There are a couple of issues that ideally would be addressed in this contract. One, it is an amendment to an existing contract. Ideally, going forward, we have a contract that conforms with our new now standard form of municipal contract. Number two, we're looking at some issues with regard to kind of jurisdictional issues on the beach. The scope of work in this contract is limited to area seaward of the OCR 40 or setback line. As we've noted in other prior meetings, in some areas along the beach, the 40-year setback line is kind of mid-beach. We probably need to, going in the future, revise that. The provision says that the employees of the contractor are responsible for informing beach goers of town beach ordinances, but doesn't have anything, any reference with regard to issuing citations. Having said all that, this agreement, this is an extension for another year. I would be comfortable myself going forward with this agreement as drafted. It's been in operation now for 4 years. It would have to be, a new RFP would have to be issued next year, and I think would be the appropriate time to address those issues, those kinds of issues, and maybe others at that time.
So thank you. Do you have a thought on number 2, the scope of work, the jurisdictional question? Do you have a thought on where the jurisdictional line should be as opposed to the 40-year setback line currently?
We are separately looking at potential revisions to the Beach Management Act, as well as potentially some changes to the zoning code.
Yep.
But with regard to the Beach Management Act, part of the problem or issue right now is that we have multiple definitions of beach in the Beach Management Act, and they're not always consistent with one another. And my thought was that we define our beach and dune systems, our area of jurisdictional interest, as being inclusive of the public area, the state-owned, essentially, portions of the beach. The main high tide line seaward. Then the kind of intertidal areas of the beach, the active beach, the OCRM setback line, as well as the crest of the primary dune line, and whichever is most landward at any given point. But again, that's kind of conceptual at this point in time, but ensure that we kind of cover, at the end of the day, the most important thing is we want to protect our beach and dune system, including all the dunes, and make sure that we're appropriately regulating activities in the dunes to ensure their health and sustainability.
So we should talk more about this offline, but there is also, I found, we discussed the other day, the monuments or U.S. Geological Survey markers. I found those on the jurisdictional website.
Okay.
And they're generally excellent in terms of their federal markers. They don't necessarily form a straight line. There is some zigzag in that line. So there would be some, they'd be good to use as they'd be permanent and non-changing, which was kind of one of my prerequisites for thinking about this in the zoning code. But the definition of the line is going to be very difficult if you do it off the markers, because you're going to have to say plus 10 feet and minus 10 feet from different markers. But that's something that I want everybody to be aware of. I have found there are U.S. Geological Survey markers, federal markers, in the dunes that exist and have been there since, I'm going to say, at least the 70s, if not earlier than that.
Well, and I would just distinguish ultimately between the zoning code, which would set forth development standards relative to some line along the beach, and some setback from some line, whether it's the OCRM line or some other line, which is critically important, and we really don't have that right now, from regulating a broader range of potential activities in the municipal code, including ingress and egress in the beach and the dunes, establishment of critical habitat and/or suitable nesting habitat, and as well as a range of other things that we might want to put in place in order to protect the dune system.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Comments?
No other questions, and since we kind of went off tangent a little bit, I appreciate especially the protecting the dunes when we get to that conversation. I've mentioned before, I'm seeing people cutting through the dunes now to get to the Kiowa River from the beach, so, making sure that we've considered all that when the appropriate time comes, I agree with.
Well, and that relates a little bit to this contract as well, with regard to enforcement of town ordinances. And I don't know, we don't have anybody from BIOR here, how many of the beach patrol folks are actually designated as code enforcement officers, if some or all of them. So they could certainly inform, regardless of whether they're a code enforcement officer, and this contract essentially obligates them to do that. They would not be able to actually issue a citation if they are not designated as code enforcement officers. Okay.
And did you say the code enforcement contract's coming up for renewal in a month or two? So should we try to capture what the mayor's bringing up in that?
Correct, the Mayor, I just want to ask you a question. The Isle Beach Patrol do issue citations for violation of the ordinances, town ordinances, so they do issue citations.
I'm aware that they have. I guess the question is how many are just some or all of the personnel? Because at some points during peak season, they'll have as many as 6 people on the beach during a particular day. And I simply don't know the answer I should as to whether every single BIOR staffer, employee who is on the beach is designated a code enforcement officer. I think I'm the only one under our statute that, no, you can also designate. I believe either the mayor or the director of public safety can designate code enforcement officers. So whether they have all been designated or whether just a certain portion of them have been.
I can definitely give you a total number before the council meeting.
And back to the dunes thing, I'll tell you anecdotally from my personal experience, having seen an increase in it. The number of BIOR that can be code enforcement is helpful. Our experience has been, when we see people crossing over to the river, we're usually at Beachwalker Park and ask the park, hey, that was our first experience. Who manages this? The Beach Patrol does. They'll call it in. I think that the event has passed by the time Beach Patrol is able to respond. So maybe those are things that we consider as we're looking at the renewal of that contract.
Yeah, I also think about this in terms of educational opportunity, and I'm not sure the signage is maybe as dense as we'd want it to be down there for not going into the dunes. And then there's also the thought that we could put some type of barrier like a sand fence. But we'd have to take that under advisement because it's not necessarily, it's one of our purview, but it's not our property. So we need to think about that going forward. But a barrier to kind of say physically, don't go here, is probably the next thing that we need to consider after signage.
Signage for sure.
Okay, with no further discussion, shall we move for a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. Thank you. The second order of business is to consider the approval for the proposal for leisure trail projects on Key Island Parkway and Beachwalker Drive. Do I hear a motion?
Well, we can want it to have Director of Public Works present the proposal and then.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and
Good
members
morning.
of the Ways and Means Committee. So the town of Key Island, we own a leisure trail that runs adjacent to the Key Island Parkway and Beachwalker Drive. It's up to us to maintain those portions of the leisure trail. We have recognized a couple of issues in some certain areas along both Key Island Parkway Leisure Trail and Beachwalker Drive Leisure Trail that need to be mitigated and improved upon. These are areas that are subject to water retention as well as areas that have cracked and are subject to tree root intrusion that is causing cracks and deterioration. The specific locations on the Key Island Parkway, it's in between Freshfields Village and Cacique, and that area of the parkway, and then on Beachwalker Drive, it's the area of the leisure trail between Bobcat Lane and the intersection at Key Island Parkway and Beachwalker Drive. The towns, we were awarded grant funding from Charleston County through their C fund and the amount of $300,000 to put towards this project. And we also were awarded say tax money and the amount of $70,000 to put towards this project. We put out an RFP for a design build to do these improvements along the leisure trails. And it was publicly posted on our website and South Carolina Business Opportunities, and we received 2 bids in response to that solicitation. One bid was from Proper Paving LLC in the amount of $129,820, and the other bid was from True Luck Construction in the amount of $282,569. Town staff is requesting that the Ways and Means Committee recommend awarding this contract to Proper Paving LLC. And then if this is approved, it will be funded through the grant that we got through the county. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you all might have.
Do you have any insight into why there's
I'm
such a
sorry,
price discrepancy?
Mr., if you get a motion in a second
Sorry.
and have discussion.
Now we'll call for a motion. Thank you.
Move the approval of the Leisure Trail contract and awarding the contract to Proper Paving LLC.
Second.
Discussion.
Do you have any insight into there's a pretty big discrepancy. Did they misunderstand the requirement? Are they just expensive? Do you have any perspective on that?
No, True Luck is very well versed in projects with us. We've worked with them plenty in the past. I actually initially, before we even went through this whole grant funding request, met out there on site with a representative from True Luck. We looked at the area, so he was well aware of what our goals were and what the scope would be. As far as the Proper Paving having a low bid, I can't speak to that. That's just the way their numbers played out. It was alarming to me initially. Because of that, I had a meeting with the president from Proper Paving yesterday, actually, and we sat down, made sure he understood the whole scope, and then we actually even went on site to take a look because he hadn't been out on site just yet. But we spent time inside talking about it, time outside, eyes on it, and he was very confident in his bid. And so to speak for the discrepancy, I can't really say just one company's prices to the others.
Appreciate that you took the extra time to make sure that they understood. Thanks.
Yes, sir.
So Brian, or I'll go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
So am I correct in understanding this stops at Cacique as you're coming onto the island?
Yes, sir.
Isn't there a place about 300 or 400 yards just short of the bridge that also gets flooded? And just normal rainfalls? Isn't there a second section in there?
There is a second section that's prone to flooding. Unfortunately, that kind of came to the forefront after we had initiated this grant funding process and started the RFP process to it. Not to speak out of turn, but I will be inquiring, since we have a lot more funding from the county as to what this is gonna cost. I can see if we're able to reallocate some of that funding to put towards that other area, since it's the same scope. It's the same leisure trail and the same problem. It's really not that big of an area too that floods right there before the bridge, so.
30 or 40 yards, right?
Yes, sir, so.
And the depth or the amount of flooding is less than it is in the other portions of KIP.
It is, so that was my initial thought when I saw this low bid come back. It is a thought that I had, maybe we can reallocate some of that funding. But I certainly want to get approval from the county, don't want to do anything that might jeopardize.
Yeah, I think my view, and I'd be interested in others, but I think my view is I would hate to do a project and fix something and then be set up for criticism. You fix this, but you didn't fix the whole problem, and it
I
is the
agree.
same scope. So just thinking out loud, I'd like to see the project entail the whole leisure trail from Freshfields to the bridge for flooding mitigation. thoughts.
Could there be an
Okay.
amendment to this now that we've, I mean, if it's the same scope, it's just adding a section?
Well, I would have to
Rebid it.
get the pricing of what that extra section would be. Now, whether that's skip that area or skip the area between the two scope areas and just do that, or continuous paving, that would obviously be a lot more. I think that would more than double the length of the current scope on Key Island Parkway. But we do have the $300,000 from the county, and we do have $70,000 from SATAX, and I think I would need to take the same route to confirm maybe with the SATAX committee. I'm not sure the procedure on that, but if we were able to say, this is going towards the park, or the Parkway bike path, it's just slightly up out of what was initially presented to the SATAX committee.
How long do you think, how long do you think it would take to get this rebid, just expanding that scope? Or, expanding the scope to include that piece?
Well, I think there's a couple ways to do it. To rebid it entirely, we have these two prices out already, and we would need to rebid it out to the public. So those.
Could we think about it as a change order to whatever?
That's-
Yes, I
that
think,
was my
I think we
second-
would want to do it as a change.
That was the second approach is if the contract's awarded, then we can maybe manipulate some of the scope a little bit that would,
Probably, the word manipulates probably.
Wrong with
okay, not manipulate, but,
revise.
revise, yes.
Contract mod.
Thank you for that clarification.
Stephanie, was there something you wanted to add, or?
Yeah, go ahead, let you.
Well, a couple other things to note. Doesn't seem like there's any particular need to redo the entire length of the KIP Leisure Trail. It was done not that long ago, and other than some areas where there was a little bit of persistent flooding, that seems to be in pretty good shape. With regard to True Luck bids, just trying to get kind of to the crux of the issue there. True Luck did the construction work for the extension, the repaving of the Leisure Trail along Beach Walker Drive previously, correct?
Yes, sir.
For whatever reason, the decision was made at that time to only go from Bobcat Lane to Beachwalker County Park, even though it was clear that there was some significantly deteriorated condition on the stretch that we are now finally repaving. But how much, do you recall how much the bid was for the work that had been done from Bobcat Lane to Beachwalker County Park?
Without fear of misspeaking,
Yeah.
I think that their two bids were comparable. About 230,000, I think. It was around $200,000 to do what they did on Beachwalker Drive.
So that's the stunning thing here about the True Luck bid, is that was $200-some thousand for 2/3 or 3/4 of a mile. And this is combined well less than that. So it's difficult to understand kind of where True Luck was coming from with regard to their bid, and may account for the wide gulf. With regard to proper paving, there's no issue. In this case, you don't have any concerns about the low bidder not being qualified to do the work.
I don't. In December of this past year, they did multi-use path paving for the town of Seabrook. They were listed as a reference. I called the reference, and he had everything great to say about working with them and the quality of the product that was delivered by Proper Paving. Proper Paving also, they paved the parking lot expansion where we put the EV charging stations up, and we were satisfied with the work that they did. So that, coupled with the reference check from Seabrook for the exact same project, basically.
It strikes me as, at least in this case, taking the low bid, particularly given the difference, there's a no-brainer.
Do you know who did recently Kika had some Leisure Trail done just inside the second gate where they moved the bike path back 300 feet. Do you happen to know who did that paving?
No, I don't.
Might just be
It-
instrumental to find out.
I think they do work with True Luck a lot, and it probably was them, but I can't say with certainty that's who did it.
I mean, that product and the timing and the execution from my standpoint visually looked great, so.
They do a
It might
great
be
job.
another reference point to.
Yeah, they do a great job, but as the mayor said, the low bid in this case with.
And I'll add a little bit of context to it. So with True Luck, they do great work. I know they do a lot of work behind the gate as well for Kika. When they did the Beach Walker Drive, their bid came in extremely high. I want to say it came in additional 300,000. It may have been about 400,000 or so. With True Luck, and I know Rollins, who's their project manager, he does this. He always comes in very high. And then you have to essentially browbeat him, and then he comes down with the number that you like. With Beachwalker Drive, in their case, they're the only ones that bid, or they weren't, but I think they were, for whatever reason, they were selected, and we then sat down with them, and they came down lower. I'm guessing he probably thought that this would happen again this time, but instead, someone came in really low, so he doesn't really have the opportunity to sit at the table to get that number down. That's kind of, I hate to say it, but that's kind of like the game that we have to play back and forth with True Luck.
Well, that's why you put out RFPs, and hopefully you get multiple bidders on these things. so,
Yes.
which,
The one thing that I just wanted to clear up, and just so you all know, I've been asking Brian this just to make sure, even with True Luck or proper pavers, because True Luck had to provide this. So with regards to the timing, I think with proper pavers, they said maybe, was it 12, 14 days, I don't recall.
They, after my discussion with him yesterday, they would anticipate wrapping this up at the latest the first week of April.
But how many days total? I don't know when it would start.
8 to 10.
8 to 10 days. So the question that I had for Brian is that during that time, I believe like Beachwalker, the trail, the bike path may be closed. It could be for an hour or two or a day. Do they have traffic controllers there so that, or are they going to be able to work so that they don't, like on Kiawah Island Parkway, I believe that we're able to put down some temporary material so that people didn't have to go out in the streets, but we also they did some night work as well, so it did not impact the daytime travelers. Did you guys discuss that? And
Yes,
if so, do they have a plan?
So there are a couple options with their plan. Their plan right now would be to basically designate a small lane in the road, have it blocked off to route around. So it's not just putting peds and cyclists in the road, but it would be coned off or roped off.
A temporary,
Basically. Yes, ma'am. So that is one of the options. The other option would be for them to bring in a traffic control company that he said would be, I think, if I remember correctly, he said it'd be $1,500 a day for them to do traffic control. So it comes out, if it's 8 to 10 day project, it's really doesn't add too much to the bid, but.
Just so that you guys were aware of that that's something that we have to do. And also on the Kiawah Island Parkway, when we're looking at potentially change order, they're looking at, I remember that there used to be puddling also issues that may be fixed or much more deeper than just rain, but near where we did the right turn lane, there was also, let's be flooding or puddling issues there as well.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's
and
been corrected or not. but
right turn lane where?
When we put the right turn lane into the PGA parking, that stretch, we used to
But-
have puddling areas.
But, I mean, it looks like that would definitely be covered by this project.
well, it was on the apron it was in the right turn lane as it
Okay.
meets the radius to turn in. So it's not on the leisure trail itself.
Okay.
Yeah, it was bad. We made them cut it out and redo it, and it doesn't hold the water that it did prior to that.
And is the plan to actually repave the entire 2,300 foot stretch? I had thought is all we were going to do is regrade two portions of this.
No, it was, the way that it was written in the RFP and how it was bid was to do that whole section. From basically the end of our bike path at Freshfields Village up to Cacique.
Okay.
Because we did identify, prior to putting this RFP out, some areas beyond the PGA parking field that aren't necessarily holding water. There's stains on the bike path that's indicative of that. It's encroaching on the area where we've got water coming underneath the causeway there, and it's kind of a proactive step to go ahead and fix that.
So to be clear, you would pull up the whole bike path, that whole regraded, and then repave the whole bike path in its section?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up what you brought up, Stephanie. It made me think of two different things. First of all, timing. You maybe thought of this, Brian, spring break and the surge and use, having it done before a big spring break surge. I know the mayor lives over by the Beach Walker one also. That has failed so badly. I walk and bike that regularly. It is so bad that people are already driving into Beach Walker. So that does create some urgency to get it done because there's a lot of people just going down Beach Walker because it's just so bumpy.
What is your sense for timing of implementation if we approve this today?
In his proposal, he initially said an anticipated start date of March 10th.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I can confirm that. But again, my conversation with him yesterday, we're really looking at first week of April of being the latest date that they would be done, assuming that this goes through.
Well, again, the contract will need to be, essentially this can be attached as an Exhibit A to the form of our contract, but the provisions of the town's municipal contract will govern, and to the extent there's any conflict, our town's contract will govern, but we should put in a time and of the essence provision in there. Part of this, there was some thought that this might slip a month trying to resolve the issues between the two bids. And I'm saying because of the timing issues, I thought it was critically important we get this project started as soon as possible so it is finished well before Easter.
Yeah, I would definitely look at the calendar to make sure, know when spring break is, know when Easter is, know when Memorial Day is, and make sure it's slotted in there, but still as timely as we can get it done. The other question I have is, out of respect for Councilman Berner, in the bidding process, we only got 2 bids. That's all the response. How many? Do you know how many people we went out to, or?
I contacted. I sent it directly to, True Luck and Three Oaks. Three Oaks declined to bid on it because they don't do design in-house. They don't do design build projects, which is what this is. There was another company that came and met with me, kind of the same. They didn't know if they were going to be able to do the design in-house. So I talked to four companies, essentially. 2 of them just decided to not bid on it, and we were left with these 2.
But critically, there is no requirement. You may only get 1 bid, but we actually put out an RFP. We posted this.
Yes, sir.
Both on our town's website as well as one other.
South Carolina Business Opportunities.
Yeah, okay.
So there's
Yeah,
fair
it was publicly posted.
Yeah.
Anybody could have bid on it.
Yeah, okay.
It's a small project.
Yes, it is a very small project.
Any other, okay, so I do have a question. So if we approve this, and let's say a change order was authorized and initiated, and it came in at a big number, $100,000, do we have to have another view on this to approve it, or can we just
I
administratively accept
believe
it?
you could give me the authority to approve a change order of a reasonable amount, as I may determine, in order to accomplish some additional work that may be warranted.
Okay.
In which case, we wouldn't have to come back. We can specify a dollar amount. You could say not to exceed 30,000, not to exceed 50,000, or I think we could simply say, you know, a reasonable amount as determined by the mayor.
Okay. I would personally, I would like to do that. I would either like to have an executive session to determine what that number is, so we don't put that number in public, so that the bidder just comes back and says, that's the number. I'd like to get their real number. How do you think we should?
Well, then we're going to have to schedule a special call meeting to do that.
I personally am comfortable with the mayor exercising his judgment on it.
Okay.
Because we can
And if you
compare
guys-
that linear footage to what they've already bid out and make sure that it's the
If-
same.
I mean, literally it would be another 100 or 200 feet is all. I mean, unless you're wanting to suggest that the entire length of the KIP Leisure Trail be redone.
That
which-
would double probably the cost. of
Well,
what
but
we-
in your bid proposal, you actually put in there, so when they were bidding, were they bidding based
Well,
on?
no, they're talking
this-
about repaving
Right.
from Bobcat all the way up to the
Right.
bridge, which
Yeah.
is not part of
Okay.
this.
No, what I
scope.
mean, what we're talking about is there is about another 100 or 200-foot stretch of the leisure trail. It's really
That's
not
it.
that, it's probably a 50-foot stretch.
Right.
That is,
Right,
as
is
you're
that-
coming on the island, that's a little bit before the bridge.
Right,
Yeah.
that was just.
Right,
that's it.
Chairman's initial question was, would we just continue that paving all the way up to the bridge? And we've talked about, no, we would skip and go up to the problem
Right.
area. Because as you said, the bike path is not, it doesn't merit to get repaved for that
Mr.
much.
Chairman, one of the suggestions, even though I know this is not procurement, but if you want, you can put for the mayor to approve not to exceed 10,000, because actually right now, the way that our procurement works is that if it's 5,000 or less, and it's not budgeted, the mayor can approve it. If it's 10,000, it's the mayor and one other council member. So if you kind of want to follow that dollar amount, you can put a not to exceed 10,000. That essentially
Well,
would-
but if we were to do this, the Ways and Means Committee approving and a council, we wouldn't
Right.
be limited by that. That's
Yeah.
literally if
Right.
we didn't say anything, our procurement provision will
Right.
allow that to be
Right.
done.
Yeah.
So this is only necessary for something that might be over the $10,000.
I mean, I personally have confidence that the mayor will take a sharp pencil to the number, if we allowed him to do that. I'm just thinking of the timing and urgency of getting done. I mean, Mayor Bell, you remember it was like, I think June, that you and I were walking up and down the bike path there last year, and I know there's a process to get here, but I hate to see it extend into summer.
Mr. Chairman, again, I'm comfortable either way. If you want to put a not to exceed number, and then if it comes back with a higher number, then that portion of the work simply wouldn't be able to be done until we had a subsequent either special call meeting or subsequent council meeting. So I'm certainly comfortable either way.
Okay, so I would entertain an amendment to the motion, if somebody wants to make an amendment to do just this,
What would be the chairman's preference?
to have an amendment to authorize the mayor with an undisclosed amount of money.
No, well, to give the mayor authority to approve a change order of a
Reasonable number.
a reasonable amount in his discretion to address an additional small portion of the leisure trail.
And so since I'm not the mayor or the chairman, how about I propose that?
So I think the amendment would be, if I
Yeah.
can requote it, the amendment would be to authorize the mayor to approve a change order that would cover the.
This contract,
Approve this-
and further amended to,
Include a change order that would cover the paving needed, needed broadly, to repair and replace the portion of the Key Island Parkway bike path that's underwater within about 300 yards of the bridge, and have the mayor authorized to approve the change order with a reasonable amount of money.
Yes.
Did that make sense, Petra?
Or, I mean, if you want to simply say not to exceed 50,000, I think we can, if you'd like to do that, and we can, I suspect it would be well less than that.
I would say not to exceed $30,000.
Okay,
Petra, do
Okay.
you have all that?
okay.
I'm fine with that.
So we have to vote on the amendment.
Yeah.
So do I have a motion to approve that amendment?
Motion to approve that amendment.
Second?
All in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Now I need a motion, we have a motion standing.
Yes.
To approve the contract
As amended.
as amended. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. So the motion to approve this contract as amended is approved.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Brian.
Okay, no new further business. Chairman's report. We are, just a couple quick things. We have approvals going forward to the town council today for the audit committee and the state accommodation tax committee. We had pretty extensive group of volunteers, and the treasurer and I went through and interviewed everybody with the sole purpose of getting, I know people won't like this analogy, but the best athletes in the seat, given their requirements of the job. And I think in every case, the treasurer and I were in agreement on every candidate that we're going to put forward to the town council meeting. We're also in budgeting season, so we've started our first round of budgeting. And I would encourage everybody to be involved in the budget process, specifically to the level of detail that you think you're going to need on specific items. And I have some of those, and the treasurer and I are scheduled, or planning to schedule to meet this week to go deeper into that, but we have had a first round of meetings on that. Treasurer's report.
Hi, okay, so I have the 6 months budget to actuals and the balance sheet for you. I think, yeah, Petra is gonna put it on. So as of December 31st, we have about 43.6 million in fund balances. Of this amount, about 56% or 24 million is general fund, which is up to, the spending is up to the council discretion. And we have 9.6 million in capital and emergency reserves, and 9.6 million for funds that are restricted for tourism related expenditures. Since we report on cash basis, so the fund balances are actually our reserves. It's not just, we just have very small payable, but this is pretty much what we have in the reserves as of end of December. So as far as the budget report, our revenues for the first 6 months were about 8.2 million, which is about 1.6 million higher than last year for the first 6 months in last year. And it's about 53% of the total budgeted revenues. And the mayor and the chairman, we met, and Stephanie, we met a couple of weeks ago to discuss it in a little more detail, just to do like a budget overview. And so all our revenues are projected to be within the budget. We do have some items that are going to be over the budget, which is building permits from the special projects, business licenses, interest income. That's the items that we, as of now, we know they're going to exceed the budget. As far as the other revenues generated by tourism, I feel like they're going to be close or a little over the budget too. Our expenditures are 5.6 million, and they are about 500,000 higher than last fiscal year for those first 6 months, and about 40% of the current budget. When you look at the individual line items, they're pretty much all at about 50%, which should be at 6 months. All the operational expenditures, like the big one, the salaries, the contracts that we just discussed, the beach contract, code enforcement. So we're projecting that our expenditures are going to be within the budget. When compared to last year, there are a few items that are higher, but that's kind of repeating every month. That's our contract with for the garbage services and the public safety, the deputies. Once the contract with the higher hourly rate was approved last year in February, we started having more coverage, and the total amount is also higher than last year.
So Dorota, I probably should have raised this on a previous occasion, but I think we need to clarify that the amount of increase related to the off-duty deputy contract, I would not think would be related to the increase in the hourly rate, because hourly rate was approved back in February prior to us budgeting for the current fiscal year. So it should just be an increase in the amount of deputy time rather than the rate itself.
But comparing to the budget, I don't think we're going to be over budget. I'm comparing to last year. And last year they were on a different rate.
Okay.
Within this year budget, I feel like we should be within the budgeted
This is not a
amounts.
variance to budget. This is a variance
Correct,
to
to
prior
last
year.
year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
So we may be a little bit over because of that increase, but we assume that we're gonna have 70% rather than 60 before. But this is comparing to last year.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions?
I've got just a general curiosity question.
Yes.
It seemed to me the number I had back in October in my head was we had a balance of, what was it, 39 million? So are we making like $1 million a month in?
So we're not in a business of making money. However, we are seasonal. So, our expenditures are pretty much, divided through the whole year. But it could be that we make now, or our reserves, we get like over 100,000 a month on the reserves. And every time we do have an overage in our bank, I only keep the minimum, so we don't pay hard fees in the bank. I transfer to the reserve. So that could be that we get, for example, our state accommodation tax, we get them quarterly. We got the first quarter in November. So this money doesn't get spent once we get it. We get the applications approved at once. However, the actual payments go through the whole year. So it could be that at this point, not necessarily we're going to keep that money. Maybe just we're banking the money right now.
So we'd be varying high right now, potentially?
Yes.
Okay.
So Councilmember Spencer, if I might address that in another respect, our fund balances continue to grow.
That's what I was getting
grow fairly significantly for a couple of reasons. One, we've been generating a fair amount of interest or return on those over the more recent times of the high interest rates. Two, we allocate funds out of our current budget into the reserves. So the reserves increase because of some allocation. In addition to that, we budget very conservatively with respect to both revenues, especially revenues, probably a little bit less so on expenditures or some of that. So we end up having been generating, after those other things, essentially an operating surplus that further feeds the reserves. So, I mean, that's why we have a $2.5 million increase in the first 6 months in the reserves.
Thank you.
And maybe to give you another way to think about this, if our reserves are $43 million in the current investment scheme that we're involved in, we're generally earning money market or short-term rates, which are broadly speaking about 5%. So you can think of, not for long history, but for the past 2 years probably, that's earning $2 million a year. So that interest income is significant at this point in time. And I probably don't expect that to change significantly over the course of this coming year, given what's going on in the economy and politics and everything else. We don't see the Fed being really aggressive lowering rates, and that front end of the curve won't change very much.
Now, all of that, I would note that all of the 9.6 million, unless we get an extension in tourism-related funding, would need to have be spent within 2 years. Some of it needs to be spent within 1 year because we're already into the second year of a 2-year allowance, and the remainder would need to be spent the subsequent year. So all of that 9.6 million that is in there now needs to be spent within the next 2 years, but it's coming in constantly as well. So that gets it has been getting more than replenished.
And one little detail adding to that is, we can extend that, but we have to designate a project and what it's gonna cost and what the expenditure is gonna be over time.
Earmark it.
And then we can, as long as it's earmarked, we can extend it past 2 years. But
That's good
there's
to
some
know.
rules and regulations around designating it and what it can be spent for.
Thank you.
So just clarify, not the full amount is state accommodation tax. There is also hospitality tax, local accommodation, and just to, just on the
That's correct.
record.
Not all of the, you're right, not all the restricted funds,
And
that's
some
correct.
of it is already approved for us, for the beach patrol and for the deputies. So about $1 million of it is already designated for us, but that I do that entry at the year end. I don't do it every month, so yes, but I just want to make sure that that's on the record.
Yeah, so we're very healthy, but don't get too excited that
Yes.
we can remain very, very healthy for a long period of time. We need to continue to monitor this with diligence.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Dorado. Citizen comments? I see none. Committee members?
Not I,
Mr.
Mr.
Belt?
Chairman?
None?
No, sir.
None for me. Thanks.
Stephanie? Dorado? All right, if that's